Hello, everyone. We're all back again, and we are on lesson 8. So hard to believe that we're really close to the end here, meaning that we've got, I think, like 2, 3 more classes after this. But to get credit for being in this class, you have to have a meaningful engagement, either verbally or through the chat, for the discussion on one of the 3 discussions on spiritual and emotional defense. Those will be the A's. And one of the discussions after the guided meditation that we're going to do today. So today's first topic is on spiritual and emotional defense. So this goes towards a defense credit. Most Jedi organizations shy away from this topic today, but it might surprise you to learn that the early Jedi community had a lot of discussions around spiritual warfare, whether it was a discussion on if it was real or if it was about cultivating tactics to defend against spiritual warfare. I guess you could say the dark arts. There was always someone with an opinion. Today, we're not really going to focus so much on the if it's real, as we are going to talk about one of the ethics of spiritual defense. And to start that, we're going to use the Jedi Code. So this one in particular is the Skywalker Code. For ethical development, the fiction gives us a nice poetic code that can help direct our ethics on spiritual and emotional defense. In the community, we call this code the Skywalker Code, but really it's like the alternative code, and apparently no one knows why this is called the Skywalker Code. So it goes, Jedi are guardians of peace in the galaxy. Jedi use their powers to defend and protect, never to attack others. Jedi respect all life in any form. Jedi serve others rather than rule over them for the good of the galaxy. Jedi seek to improve themselves through knowledge and training. Now, this is going to be a bit out of order. As you can see, this definitely was not the first line, but here's a breakdown of how we can interpret the code with regards to the topic of spiritual and emotional defense. For this line, it is Jedi serve others rather than rule over them for the good of the galaxy. This may be the last line of the Jedi Code, but it's perhaps where we need to start. We have to remember that our egos need to be set aside in order to achieve a reasonable and meaningful resolution. Jedi seek to improve themselves through knowledge and training. In order to get to a point where we can respect life in any form, it helps to meet people where they are and acknowledge that there are emotional and spiritual attacks against us, and that they come from some kind of pain the person is going through. Whether we're the cause of that pain or simply the means to take out their pain on is something we really need to explore. Because a lot of times we just sit there and we're like, oh, we're being unfairly treated. But maybe we're not. Jedi respect all life in any form. Improvement upon oneself means also acknowledging whether we're responsible for the conflict. If we are not responsible for the pain, then we should exercise compassion. In these different ways, depending on the situation, acknowledgement and acceptance of the circumstances as they are is one of the more Jedi ways that we can respect life in any form. Jedi use their powers to defend and protect, never to attack others. This is probably the most informative line when dealing with spiritual or emotional attacks. While returning an attack as a form of defense, when it comes to emotional or spiritual matters, there are far better ways of dealing with a problem than launching a counterstrike. Finally, Jedi are the guardians of peace in the galaxy. Given that we began with the last line, it seems only fitting that we end with the first line. As guardians of peace, it is important that we seek to find our own personal balance before we address any attack. And frankly, that's easier said than done. Although it is the first line of this code, sometimes it's actually the very last thing we achieve. So what is one of those better ways than a counterstrike? The Jedi path is one forged in comparative theology, so it seems best that we consult other traditions to find a good place to start answering the question for the Jedi path. As it happens, several traditions around the world seek emotional healing in order to combat those forms of attacks. In the Hawaiian tradition, it was to seek reconciliation either with the deity they offended or with the person that was angry at them. Sometimes it was warranted anger, and sometimes it was just plain jealousy. Still, they had to go do that. By making it a communal and or family affair, the support network around the victim was able to demonstrate that they had their backs. And this helped a great deal in providing a barrier against the spiritual attacks of a man or deity. In Christian traditions, which we're probably all more familiar with, it is to seek forgiveness from God and the person you wronged, which sounds very similar to the Hawaiian tradition, right? The only real difference is that you can do that one privately. You don't have to have a whole group. In the Igbo tradition, it was to reconcile with one's chi, which is not to be confused with the Chinese version of chi. It's the Igbo chi, and it referred to a personal deity of sorts, and realign with the purpose they had agreed to before birth. Yes, so there was like this kind of contract between Chukwu, I might be getting that wrong. It's CHUKWU, and an individual human. So what they do is they seek to bring a person into acceptance of Chukwu's plan for their life rather than the one they wish to seek. These all point to a lost truth that spiritual fortification begins with emotional stability and acceptance. In modern times, there are therapists which are highly trained to help people reach this emotional stability, even though it often takes a great deal of time to work through trauma in our past or in our current worldview. Let's move to discussion A1. What other kinds of guidance do you feel the Skywalker Code can lend a Jedi when dealing with a spiritual and or emotional attack?
So the second line says Jedi's use the powers to defend and protect, never to attack. And I think, especially when it comes to like spiritual and emotional attacks, we have to defend the people, even the people that are attacking us. We have to defend them from ourselves, from what we could be capable of. To be a Jedi is to practice restraint. So we could give in, we could do worse, but we don't because we're Jedi. We are defending somebody else from something worse by practicing that.
If I can take that even a little step further, it kind of falls on the whole like karma thing, if you believe in that. If you extend negative karma to somebody because they hurt you, it could come back and bite you. So it's better to just find other ways to combat like what they've done to you, even if that means like, okay, well, I just have to walk away from you, or I just need to like take a break and get away from you, something like that.
That's the one that jumped out at me too. The same one is that you take the high road. So if someone attacks you in the way that they attacked you, you realize that, revenge is not part of our path. Retaliation is not supposed to be like necessarily part of the path if they're attacking us. I think it also means that you forgive those people. You do take the high road. I love that. What is that saying? Revenge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I love that one. Kind of live my life that way. So you don't, and also go on the attack, just like you don't go around attacking others either. Obviously, that is definitely not part of the path. So I think it speaks to not retaliating and not like, I hate to say the words like sink to that level because that sounds judgy, but I'm not sure of another better way to say that. And again, not attacking. So just kind of going along with what Darcy was saying, and like Maggie was saying too, like karma, you don't put out negative in the world. You're trying to respond with positivity.
I think we more or less have the same answer. I thought the same thing about that. Could also say the line, I can't read it right now, but Jedi serve others. It's important to remember this too, because when I hear like emotional or spiritual attack, I immediately think of someone saying something negative about you, trying to directly attack something about you. Not physically, but personality-wise or something that you do to attack you. And I think since we serve others, it's important to remember that oftentimes that kind of attack doesn't come because of you. It comes from them. If it's something wrong, or something, I don't want to say wrong with them, but there's something on their side that they're projecting at you.
Right.
So it's important to empathize as well.
I'm a big fan of the saying, hurt people. And I think that's kind of what you're also trying to say, Churchill.
So it's a good way to protect yourself is to not take everything personally. And so I kind of let it brush off. You understand that the person attacking you is projecting something at you from themselves.
Yeah, and sometimes that's a self-defense mechanism because something horrible has happened to them and they lash out.
I've known plenty of people that have severe trauma in the past, and they come up as very abrasive, very aggressive, very assertive, but it's not coming from a place of confidence. It's coming from a place of fear.
Yeah.
They're afraid, so they're lashing out, and you just happen to be in the way.
It sounds like that's very much in line with the third line there. Jedi respect life in any form, even if that form is a hurt person, even if you don't know the story behind it.
Right.
You're respecting the fact that they are still a person and deserving of that respect.
Yeah, and actually, the last line on this too is we seek to improve ourselves through knowledge and training. You could even like tag that on there by like if you get to know somebody, you can learn like about them and why they act the way they act. That will improve, or in theory should improve your interactions with them, I guess is a good way of phrasing that. And it doesn't have to be just people, that last line. That could be like anything. Just learn as much as you can about something so that you have a better understanding. That way you have more of the picture. You can kind of understand why something happened or where somebody's coming from, I guess is a good way of phrasing that.
I like to say something, I mean, without bringing up like past trauma or anything like that. I can just vaguely sort of say from myself, Jedi seek to improve themselves, improve myself through training. Well, I've done a lot of improvement on myself, and I've had a lot of very difficult people in my life with whom I choose not to, I don't know if I'm using this right, or if I'm saying this right, or if this makes any sense, not to let them affect me spiritually, or not to let them kind of rent space in my head. Sort of like raise the rent, kick them out, pray for them, that kind of thing, and not get on the defense line and get on in attack mode. I think it makes perfect sense.
Definitely, one of the byproducts is that you become your own fortress by not letting it affect you.
And I think if I can, Allie, the top line just kind of binds all this together. In order to be peaceful or to show peace, you have to do these other things in order to achieve peace.
Peace like war must be waged.
Right.
All right, so Sasha has Jedi seek to improve themselves through knowledge and training. It's important to be able to identify the type of attack being levied against you and to be able to empathize with the attacker, understanding why they are attacking you. It is also important to train oneself to remain calm in hostile situations and to be able to de-escalate and help your opponent rather than accept their negativity. Spiritual judo, if you will. I like that. Also, spiritual judo is a great name for it.
Yeah, I like that too.
So we're going to move to the next slide. It has 2 questions on it. The first question is, how has someone forgiving you helped you find spiritual and or emotional stability?
For me, I've had instances in my life where I've inadvertently hurt people and I didn't realize it until later. And once I found out, obviously I felt horrible, but, just having that person say, hey, listen, you didn't know, now do better next time, and, all is well. It took a lot of, like, that stress off of me because I do get stressed out. I'm not an vindictive person by nature, or at least I try very hard not to be. And, it bothers me when people think that I'm vindictive. So just by them telling me, hey, we're good, that actually took a lot off of my plate. It made me I felt like my soul was lifted a little bit, if you will.
I would say my wife can be incredibly wise just by being observant, and they often help me. I have a habit of catastrophizing things where I blow things out of proportion if the slightest thing goes wrong, and they have a very good way of just kind of cutting through the bowl, so to speak. It's kind of like the story I told about my dad who went to the army doctor. Doctor, the arm hurts when you do this. Well, then stop doing it. It seems obvious, but when you're kind of frantic, it kind of cuts through everything and makes you see more clearly. That would be my rock.
During the course of my apprenticeship back with the Toad Show, my training master and I had a rather severe falling out. We've fallen out since again, and we haven't talked since. But during that time, I remember I was like, "This is it. Nope, the apprenticeship can't continue. I don't trust this guy." And I was willing to just sever off the apprenticeship completely at that point. And I was even considering just leaving being a Jedi entirely because I'm like, no, this is the type of person that's around. I can't do this anymore, which is stupid. You don't quit a whole path because one person's a bum. I don't know. It took us a lot of talks we had to take some time away from each other just to like breathe, cool off. But eventually we did work out our differences, get back together, continue the apprenticeship. And of course, like that, the overall course of the apprenticeship did help me like get better in tune with myself. Because as I've said many times before, before being a Jedi, I was a very angry, like cussing matches with my boss on a regular basis type thing. Like scream and yell and throw things. I just had so much anger and I just didn't know what to do with it. And after my training master was through with me, it's gone. Like it's not gone. It's just more constructive now. It's like, hey, find something better to do with it than just scream into the void because the void ain't listening.
Someone in the chat said they had a disagreement with their husband and the husband forgave them, made them feel a lot better to not have a monster there under the bed and to work through the situation to a solution.
I wanted to just weigh in a little bit about this because I feel like a lot of my own healing journey had the basis of forgiving, having others forgive me, and also forgiving myself. But forgiveness gives way to being human. And I feel like there's no human being that is perfect. We can strive to be the best we can, but life is stressful. Life is messy. There is such a beautiful gift when somebody's willing to see your humanness. But it does come as A3 talks about is working together. But a big part of finding emotional stability from being forgiven came from being able to put some of that weight down, right? Because I think like all of us want to be good, but sometimes due to self-defenses that we're not always conscious of, come out and we tend to hurt the people that are closest to us. That's where vulnerability comes in. We tend to hurt the people that we love most because those are usually the emotional attachments that are deepest. And those are the ones that usually cause those wounds to come up because those emotional connections are so deep. I think that forgiveness is that part of acknowledging your role in it, and acknowledging that you hurt somebody. And forgiveness is an acknowledgement that happened. And I think a true forgiveness is not so much not holding you to it, but learning from that aspect and then doing better the next time, like Maggie said. But that's my 2 cents that I wanted to say about forgiveness. But I would not be who I am today if I did not receive the forgiveness from the people that I hurt.
Thank you, Karina. I really appreciate that testimony.
I've been in situations where forgiveness was never forthcoming. Like even when you're like, hey, I'm sorry that my actions hurt you and that I need to step back, from this relationship. I don't want to talk to you, no, I don't forgive you. And it's like, that wasn't really the question, but like, I couldn't really think of a time when I'd asked for like forgiveness and been given it, I guess. So you just kind of have to carry that with you. And it kind of like nibbles at the back of your mind. When you do something, like you have to separate yourself from someone for your own well-being and they can't forgive you. I don't know. You have to, so then you like justify things to yourself and forgive yourself. But I don't know. It's really hard, I think, not to get forgiveness for people when you're trying to be on this path of self-improvement. So I don't know how to work with that, to be honest.
I think the way to really acknowledge that or work with it is that both things can be true. You can be sorry and forgive yourself and acknowledge that you are not the person that did that. And you can understand that that person has every right to still cut you off and not forgive you or give that to you. But both things can be true. They were hurt and they are allowed to continue to protect their boundaries the way they need to. And you just have to understand that is where they're at. But that doesn't mean that's who you are. That is just a version of you that caused the rift, but that does not behold you to staying and being that person. That's why I really liked that Lauren said this, but the last line is that Jedi seek to improve themselves. And she mentioned that it has a lot to do with fortifying yourself. So a lot of self-improvement is understanding and learning that just because what somebody else thinks of you doesn't define you. But yes, your actions cause that rift to occur, but that doesn't mean that is who you'll always be. And that's just accepting that is the truth of the matter, and both things can be true.
Thank you, Karina. That hits home. That's really beautifully put. You're so wise. You're so wise.
I just made a lot of mistakes.
Oh, no. You're awesome.
I think we all though, like made mistakes. I mean, I feel like we're always growing, we're always learning. Yeah, exactly. It's experience, and it's also just growing up, getting older. You learn as you get older.
Anybody else want to weigh in? A3, how do you think that working through your emotions to forgive someone might benefit your spiritual and or emotional health?
Can't speak for everybody on this, but one of the core habits that we teach at Jedi Conclave is acceptance, including of the things that you can't change. So, like, working to try to forgive somebody, like, I think it's important. It's just learning to release things. It's like it's a chain, it's an attachment, and not a healthy one either. So it's pulling you back. It's going to like drag you down and hurt you throughout your whole life if you're not at least trying to forgive the person that caused you this pain, even if they don't want to accept it, or if they don't want to, or if they don't forgive you for what you've done. It's your job to, as a Jedi, to work towards trying to earn that forgiveness, even if it's not forthcoming. And if it's not forthcoming, that's just another thing you're gonna have to accept as just a reality of life. But it doesn't change how you should approach it. And as a result, like it's better for your spiritual health, because it's very hard to sit with yourself when you think yourself to be a monster. You sit with yourself, you learn to sit with yourself, and you begin to hear these types of things, and it just tells you what you have to work on. So learning to quiet those voices through earning and giving forgiveness is important.
As usual, I agree with Darcy. I don't want to be angry. It doesn't feel good. I don't want to be resentful. Again, it doesn't feel good. I don't want to hold on to, when people have not sought forgiveness for the things they've done. If they don't seek it out, that's okay. You just have to accept that's what they did. They're not sorry, but don't make them the enemy or the villain in your personal life drama, just because, it's really hard to live a positive, happy life if you're just holding on to all of that anger and resentment and, oh, this is why, I can't stand them. Just kind of good to just kind of let it go and accept that they are what they are and that you can't change other people. I think that was always like something I learned with age. I used to try to change people or rescue people, and just kind of, you can help people, you can support people, you can empathize with people, you can give them compassion, but you have to kind of accept that you can't change them, that they have to want to change. So, yeah, people are just, we're not responsible for everybody changing their personality to suit us.
Maggie?
Yeah, so I learned a long time ago that not everybody is going to have the same ideas or moral compass that I have. I have this tendency to kind of hold people to the same standard that I try to hold myself to, and I had to really work on myself to realize, well, not everybody's going to be like you. So you just need to do your best to try to understand where they come from and try to be more empathetic to them, because not everybody has the same ideas or the same upbringing or the same moral compass that you have. That's just a fact of life. But you can try to be more empathetic to people and maybe a little more understanding.
Churchill?
Might be an off way of looking at it. I could say that if someone whom you wronged forgives you, it might be kind of a way of looking at it as a benchmark of your improvement. That person whom you've hurt in the past can look at you and see how you've changed and better yourself, and that you're not the same person as you are before, and can forgive you. I think that might be a sign you're on the right path.
I was raised in a household where you didn't admit that you had done something wrong. For example, if you got in trouble at school, mom would help us come up with excuses for how we could get out of trouble. And it was all about making sure that, you never admitted fault, don't talk to the cops, kind of thing. Learning forgiveness was never really something that we were taught. It wasn't like they explicitly said, you need to make up an excuse every time. It was just kind of like every time something happened, here's a way to get out of it kind of thing. And I guess what I've learned is that, like, my parents are never going to admit that they've ever done anything wrong, because why would they? They wouldn't let us admit when we had done something wrong, because we would, quote, get in trouble. And you're not supposed to get in trouble. And they don't want to get in trouble themselves. They don't want to admit that they've done anything wrong. They don't want to admit that things that happened when we were growing up probably, weren't the best. And so they're not going to seek forgiveness. I've come to accept that, and I've worked through that. And, I used to be a little rage monster when I was a teenager and a young adult, and it was hard to work through that. But I truly and honestly have forgiven them. I try to take that same approach with anybody that has ever, done something wrong in regards to me, and I try to just wholeheartedly forgive them, because that's a burden I'm not willing to carry with me. It's a burden that I don't want. I don't like the way I feel when I feel like I've been wronged, and so it's a lot easier for me to just say, you know what, that's where you are right now. That's who you are. That's who you're choosing to be. That's how you're choosing to behave. I still love you. I still care about you, and I forgive you for what you've done. It's like that verse in the, that thing that Jesus said on the cross, forgive them, Father, for they don't know what they do. And I kind of feel like a lot of people who do bad things don't necessarily understand what it is they're doing. They don't understand how they're making you feel. They don't understand what kind of pain they're causing you. And so being able to forgive them and say, I accept who you are. I accept who you are being in this moment, but I know that deep down, this isn't you. Like, and even if it is, I still forgive you. Like, because you don't understand what it is you're doing. I don't know. It has helped me a lot to be able to just say, I forgive you to everybody.
I want to kind of tag off of what Sasha just said. It's one of those where it definitely helps cleanse you by forgiving somebody, because you're not carrying that burden of being upset or ticked off at them anymore. You're just kind of like, all right, well, we're gonna just go past this, and I forgive you and move on. There's just something very cleansing about that. I do agree with him when he brought up the whole, Jesus on the cross scenario, because I've actually said that before. Forgive them, for they don't know what they've done. Maybe more to myself. I do find that very healing to be able to do that.
So something that I want to bring up with this is the Hawaiian tradition has a really good way, or a really interesting way of looking at all of this. The reason that people went into Ho'oponopono, which is not the actual term for what it was. When you look up Ho'oponopono online, that's not what it was. It's like a new age rendition of a modern retelling of how to do that. The original one was very communal. What I found interesting when I researched it is that it was something that you brought together, especially in times of someone being sick, physically sick. And by forgiving another person, it lifted that that illness out of your body, and you could start becoming healthier. There's actually a story of a guy who he was in a hospital in Hawaii, and he had his family come in to ask for forgiveness from his wife. And then even though the wife didn't seem, or as soon as he got done asking for the forgiveness, he started healing finally. So it sits in your body. The spiritual and emotional health sits in your body. And if you're not set right with it, it attacks you physically. And that actually is a scientific phenomena that we're starting to rediscover. What was also of interest to me was that you could get the physical illness because you haven't forgiven the other person. So you had to release that and give them forgiveness, which set you right with the gods, even if that person didn't accept it back. And going back to Sasha's example with Christ on the cross, if we look at Christianity, God has several times where even he doesn't want to forgive the Jewish people in the Old Testament. And there's a point where Moses goes and was like, hey, look, God, you can't kill them off. Yeah, sure, you said you wouldn't do it with blood, because you said you wouldn't do it with blood when you did the flood last time. Now you're talking about using fire to consume them. Not a good idea. So God had to forgive and relent on that, because if he didn't, he wouldn't be able to move forward with the Jewish people, and we would probably be stuck in a cycle where it was always kill off the family, start anew, kill off the family, start anew. if you look at how the biblical tale goes. When we look at all of this, we see that one of the other things that it does is spiritually, we are here to help other people. Emotionally, we have to cleanse ourselves so that we can engage in that spiritual charity, so to speak, with people. So it can benefit your health by releasing that, your spiritual health, by releasing that so that you can move forward on actually doing things that benefit mankind. If you're constantly holding some sort of hatred over someone, you never know if that's going to impede your ability to help them. If you have something against someone, like let's just throw out a really insane thing, but let's just say that you are a medical professional, as an example, and you have something against people who are LGBT. If you can't accept that this is their lifestyle, accept them for who they are, then anything you do with regards to their health, you've got that emotional turmoil going on, and you never know if that is what affected your ability to help that person if that person died. And that's an extreme circumstance, but it illustrates the point of what I'm trying to get here, is that you never know how your emotions or your spiritual health are playing into your interactions with other people and how much that is hurting them in the long run, because you have this thing that you can't forgive them for something either be not within their control or even within their control. And that's another thing. People are unforgiving on the most ridiculous things. It's like, oh, you have to release that. Anybody else have anything to add?
No, other than, I'm kind of sensing a theme here with religions. I know people will often say they all kind of teach the same thing, but it's very interesting to hear your take kind of on like the Hawaiian culture, and you're hearing the same thing kind of there too, about how important forgiveness is and how important it is to just let that stuff go, homie.
That's one of the reasons I believe forgiveness is a universal truth. That one I can actually prove is a universal truth, or at least give a really, really good thesis on how it is. Churchill?
I'm starting to remember the details of this. This happened like when I first joined IJF, but there's a Facebook group online that Karina invited me into. One of the first posts I came across was one where it was kind of people going back and forth about what a real Jedi is, and I'm sure you guys heard all the sides of that kind of argument, I'm sure. But there's a few people that I definitely noticed on there that were just absolutely adamant about what they were doing, what they were saying was true, and anybody else was absolutely wrong. It's just struck me that none of these people are kind of seeing what's really going on here, and it's the fact that none of them are willing to compromise or see each other's point of view. They're all drawing hard lines in the sand. And the way it looked to me as a third party kind of viewing everybody doing this is you're all just fighting each other and you're not attacking the true problem. And it's the problem that you won't compromise. You won't see eye to eye. That was the real evil here. It wasn't one Jedi didn't follow this doctrine absolutely to the letter, or another one was kind of just a weekend Jedi, so to speak. But that's the post I left, was that you guys are not seeing that the real enemy is this animosity you're building towards each other. You're just escalating it worse and worse and worse, and it comes to a head eventually. So he's not the problem. It's that anger that you're trying to hold on to. You're all doing it. You just won't admit it.
I think too, sometimes in the heat of the moment, it's hard to see, the tree through the forest
Until you run into it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I didn't see that discussion that you're talking about, but that's kind of what I was thinking when you were talking about it.
I was just trying to find it too. I can't find it. If I do, I'll go on the Discord or post it on the Discord, but it was a while ago.
I'm sure it'll happen again. It's a very common argument that comes across.
I was going to say 20 plus years. I've definitely seen it quite a few times.
Yeah, it makes its rounds. I was just going to touch on a little bit because I have been doing a lot of studies in curanderismo, so Mexica or Aztec healing, and there's a healing method called pláticas, which means basically is talks, but it talks about approaching and forgiving and how some of that gets trapped in the body, because a lot of the times when we make mistakes, we are the ones that are ravishing our heads about it. We are the ones that are demonizing us and really punishing us for the mistake more than maybe the actual event calls for. So it is that stress and that belief that we are causing these like visceral reactions in our body and to punish ourselves. And so that manifests as stress, and that affects the body. Cortisol has a bunch of effects that causes illnesses. And the way we hold our body too, tension can cause body aches, and that can create these other illnesses. So part of that is, part of the rituals is to try to move any of those energies or emotions, right? Emotions are energies through the body to try to release them. But yeah, I agree that it's a universal feeling of how religions try to incorporate forgiveness into healing modalities, for sure.
Maggie?
So it's interesting you bring that up, Karina, because I just recently discovered that I tend to hold stress in my shoulder blades, and that's why I have a lot of problems there. Well, one of the reasons. We aren't going to go there with the broken back from the Army, but that's actually one of the reasons is because that's where I hold my stress, is in the back, in that area. So it's really interesting you to bring that up, because I literally just discovered that probably last week. So I've been trying to be much better about, like, if I do feel like I'm getting stressed out, to like try to physically and emotionally just talk myself into this space where I'm not like getting so worked up that part of me seizes up again. It's about 50-50 if it works, but I have noticed an improvement since I discovered that.
Yeah, no, it's for sure. Like a lot of the times, like unclench your jaw, right? Unclench your jaw, because I do it all the time, especially when I'm stressed. That causes headaches. That's your whole body is connected to a lot of that. A lot of the times it starts with how our emotions are, how feel, because that will engage our body, and our body, if there's some sort of tension and we're not letting it go for hours, it's called like parasitic tension in the body. It just starts to drain at you, and sometimes you don't even notice. You're like, you get home and you're just so drained, right? Because your body has just been clenched all day. It's not that your body hasn't been doing anything. It's been doing a lot. It's just you weren't conscious of it.
Totally. My back gets like that too if I'm tense. And then the other thing is driving. It's clenching the steering wheel, and my thumb gets pain because I realize that I have to not do that because it's affecting my whole hand.
I
All
also
right.
clench my teeth.
Yeah, I do a lot of that too. A lot of it is in my upper body. Except when I was going to do a physical fitness test, then it was caught up in my calves, and I would get what do they call them? The cramp that you get in your horse.
Charlie
something?
horse.
Charlie horse? Yeah, Charlie horse.
Charlie
Everyone's like,
horse.
Allie, how do you not know that word? A Charlie horse.
We all knew.
Oh man, getting
But,
those
yeah.
when I'm laying in bed are the worst. I get
them in my
like-
and I don't understand how that happens, but I can feel them in my feet. It is the worst.
So, like, what I don't understand is, I would go months without ever getting a Charlie horse, but it was without fail the morning that I was going to have a physical fitness test, which involved running, and I hate running. I would wake up in the middle of the night with a Charlie horse, and I'm like, oh my gosh! I'm like sitting there trying to stretch it out. I'm like, please go away.
I've learned that the best way to get rid of them is by actually like standing or pushing if your toes like this, go like this. This is
I would have to grab my toes and pull it back to try and get it out.
Yeah, standing up is the fastest way. I didn't realize that.
Well, maybe I'll try standing next time if I can, assuming I don't fall.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
Anyone else? Next slide. Virtual Labyrinth of Release. During this second half, we are going to do a guided meditation. As a reminder, if you participate in one of the two discussions after this meditation, you will get credit towards your Seeker program. Up to this point, we've talked about a few different types of meditations. What you may not be aware of is that International Jedi Federation does use meditations that are designed specifically for the Jedi community. The meditation I'll be guiding you through today is one such meditation, and it is one of the many forms of the Labyrinth of Release. So traditionally, the Labyrinth of Release is specific to a person, place, or thing, as it was designed as a form of funeral for someone who has passed on, or to let go of an attachment that you're finally ready to get rid of. However, this version of the meditation is more dependent on what your spirit feels is needed. That is, this one will lead you to someone that you need to forgive or who needs to forgive you. So please pay attention to what I'm about to say intently. Wait, not you will understand. Sorry, I saw it. I love that song. Okay, anyways, whoever the person is that you connect with, it will be the person that either weighs the most heavily upon you or that you lay the most heavy upon them. This may not be someone you are ready to forgive. If you encounter someone you are still having difficulty forgiving, listen to them. Hear them out before you say what you have to say. Maybe you do need to get some things off of your chest. And if by the end you still cannot forgive them, tell them in the meditation that you cannot forgive them. They deserve the truth just as you deserve their truth. That wisdom also goes to those of you who find yourself asking forgiveness from another person in this meditation. No one in the room will know who it is that you're doing that with, because it's going to be all guided meditation, but have that conversation in your head. They equally have a right to reject you. They don't have to forgive you. Forgiveness is a choice. It's not a mandate, but at least asking for it is the first step in trying to achieve forgiveness for yourself or someone else. If you cannot forgive a person before leaving the labyrinth, you will be prompted with an opportunity right at the end of the labyrinth to say something before you exit it. Listen intently to what you have to say before you leave. And if you still cannot forgive them, just simply say, I am stepping back onto my journey. That is, you won't say, I'm releasing you into the forest. You just say, I am stepping back onto my journey when you exit the labyrinth. For those of you who have forgiven the other person or apologized, regardless of whether or not the person accepts your apology, you will say, I now release you into the force, and with renewed strength, I step back onto my journey. I'll remind you about these, but I do use, I now release you into the force at the end of the meditation. So when I say that, if you did not forgive them, remember, I am stepping back onto my journey. That's all you say if you didn't forgive them. I will remind you of these things before you leave the labyrinth, but I want you going in with full understanding that the outcome of this meditation is not set in stone. Are there any questions before we begin? Okay, so there are 2 questions here. This way you can still get credit if you don't want to share your experience. Does anyone want to share their experience? You don't have to go into specifics either.
I can talk about mine. It ties into what we were talking about earlier with Rebecca, because the person that came to mind is actually somebody who I had a really close relationship with, but I made a mistake that caused the friendship to break. They also said a few things to me when that happened that broke my heart, and it had to do with who I am as a person. So there was this mutual brokenness or hurt with each other. What came up during that was the acknowledgement that we both hurt each other, and we both apologized, and that it was the acceptance that we're just not in each other's lives now. That doesn't mean that what we experienced together wasn't real, that we didn't actually really love each other. And I think it had a lot to do too with where I am now with life, because there used to be a lot of guilt centered around the mistake that I made. But it's a mistake that I made out of ignorance of my own trauma responses. It wasn't intentional to hurt him. But just because it wasn't intentional doesn't mean that I didn't hurt him. I hurt him with my actions. So it's really this multi-complex situation where acceptance is really important, to just kind of acknowledge where we're at now. And also acknowledging that maybe he wasn't ready to forgive me. Because ironically, after 5 years of us not talking, I was walking down the street and he crossed my path. And he didn't look at me and we didn't make eye contact. But it was interesting to see him in this scenario, because maybe he wasn't ready to forgive me in that space or for what happened. But it doesn't stop me from learning from my own mistakes and being where I'm at. And I actually applaud him if he's not ready to forgive him or to forgive me. I think it says a lot of beautiful space of where he is and what he's willing to protect. Because while forgiveness is a wonderful gift to give, it is also really important to help us protect ourselves. forgiveness, and you've said this before, Ali, is a process. If you're not in the space to forgive somebody, don't do it because people say that it's the best and it's for your health and blah, blah, blah. I've been guilted into forgiving people before I was ready, and it caused harm. Because the truth of the matter is that while forgiveness is a very powerful and beautiful healing tool, acceptance of the situation is what's needed to move forward. And maybe with time, forgiveness can follow. But I think it's also important to really define what forgiveness means. Because like for me, forgiveness doesn't mean absolution. To me, forgiveness is the acceptance of what happened and letting those feelings of what happened, like, be there and accept and move it and releasing them. But there's things that people happen that doesn't mean that you can't hold them accountable for what they did. And I think there's an important difference in messiness that needs to be acknowledged there. I just wanted to share that little piece because I feel like it was just really important to acknowledge that not forgiving somebody doesn't mean that you are not, I don't know, elevated or more knowledgeable. If you're not there, it is completely okay. And I also want to just give space for that because I think, like I said, it is the parts of you that want to protect you, and it is okay to do that. It is the way that you show love for yourself right now. And if you're not there in the process, that's okay.
Thank you, Karina. I'm glad you brought that up. Because I did say it at the beginning, but you said it so much more beautifully. Go ahead, Rebecca.
I think I came away with a couple of, like, at least one lesson that maybe I didn't realize before on this journey. I think I was able to understand this other person and where they were coming from and what other people had caused them to feel a certain way. Not something I did personally, but other family members had made this person, feel less than or not important. And I think somebody earlier said, hurt people hurt people. So I feel like I stepped into greater compassion. And I've been there before, but it was deepened, I think, for the experiences that caused them to maybe act the way that they act and have acted. So I appreciated the understanding of where they were coming from. It made me feel sorry for them, so there was, like, I was like, wow, that's really sad. Like, I feel sad right now. But also it doesn't mean that it's okay. It's still not okay to hurt people. I think Karina just said it better than what I was going to say, is that I was going to say that forgiveness isn't black and white. And I think I didn't think about it that way before, but it's not like you're 100% forgiven or 100% not forgiven. It's definitely a process, and that you can forgive someone and still kind of be like, hey, that's not okay. It's still not okay. I forgive you, but it wasn't acceptable. I have compassion for you. I have empathy. I understand. I feel really sorry for what you went through, but it's still not okay. And while I forgive you, I think tonight I realized I have some gray areas where I feel like I still would kind of like to hear that apology. I was like, that's never happened, and I can forgive them, but I would still, it would mean so much to hear a heartfelt apology. So, I've forgiven them, but am I 100% over it? No, it's a journey, like other people have pointed out. It's a process, and I think some days are better than others.
Thank you, Rebecca, for sharing that.
I just kind of want to tag off of Rebecca. She just kind of said what I was going to say is I'm still waffling, like if I've truly forgiven this person or not. I'm getting there. I don't hate the person, and I don't wish them any ill will. I just am kind of in this weird spot still, where what they did was not okay. I'm just having a bit of a hard time just trying to get over that part of it. But all in all, I'm not I don't want to see anything bad happen to them. I don't want to see any ill wish or anything. I have none of that even crosses my mind when I think of them. But I'm kind of struggling with this whole ultimate forgiveness part of it. I think that's going to be a process, like Rebecca was saying. It's just going to be eventually maybe I'll get there, maybe I won't. I don't know. But I think what I can do is just continue to kind of go through these meditations to try to hopefully eventually maybe work that out. I don't know. I don't know if it'll ever work out, but I mean, I think this was helpful because it kind of made me think about it more, and it was definitely healing in that respect. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of how I feel.
I think every time you get an opportunity to revisit things that hurt us, we get to also see where we're at in our journey. And seeing how our bodies and how our emotions react to that can also let us know where we're at in the process. There are absolutely things that have people that have done that are not, I would like to say that there are things that are not forgivable, and that's okay too. I think what I really want to emphasize is that while forgiveness is beautiful, it can be healing. Ultimate forgiveness is not the goal. The goal is to make sure you first honor where you're at. Don't force yourself to be or do something that is not where you're not at. For me, I could not forgive my childhood abuser for the longest time. And that's still a process because that is still something that comes up. And when I think about it, I cry. But what I've learned is that I had to honor the parts of me that were angry that happened, the unfairness of it, the innocence that got corrupted from that emotion. Part of the strength that I learned through the process is that I had to actually dive into that anger, honor it, realize that it was the parts of me that didn't feel like anybody else defended me. It's the parts of us that love us so much that they're angry and don't want to release it because those are the only parts that still remember what happened to us. And so I think that when we can honor where we're at and accept and love us and not feel guilty for not being able to release, gives us more space to see how gray that area can be and how maybe in the future, maybe it's just more forgiving the situation more than the person. But I will stand on this hill that I did not need to forgive my abuser in order to start healing. I more needed to learn how to navigate the acceptance of what had happened, learn to navigate the anger that came with it, and learn to pour love into those spaces that were not ready to let go. And it was in honoring the fact that I wasn't ready to forgive that I found forgiveness. And if it doesn't happen, I'm okay with it. And if it does one day, I'm okay with it too. I am in a point right now where I feel like I have forgiven my abuser, but I go back and forth and I honor that. I honor that some days that pain comes back, and I honor that I still feel like I need to protect myself or that little girl inside of me that nobody was there to protect to. And right now I'm at a part where I feel like I have forgiven him. But if one day that feeling comes back, I'm going to honor that space too. It's just about being there for where you're at, and to be there for yourself now is the most important part.
So we're on B2. I know some of you didn't want to share your experience, or maybe you were not able to engage in the meditation. I am not Gabe. Gabe does so much better at drawing people in. So I want to still give you an opportunity to get credit for this meditation and ask a completely different question. So as you might have been able to tell, this meditation is built around a formal ceremony, meaning that you can perform this if you have a real live labyrinth. What differences do you think are present between doing this meditation virtually using your imagination versus actually walking the labyrinth to experience it in person? Who wants to go first? Rebecca.
I didn't know I had my hand up, but yes, I do have thoughts about this actually. You're psychic, Allie. With my women's group, I've done several labyrinths, both outdoors in like a natural space where they have a permanent one set up, and indoors. And honestly, I find doing the virtual one where I'm just able to be on my own sofa, despite the fact that my 3 dogs kind of tend to interrupt me when I'm trying to meditate. I found it a lot easier to go where I need to go virtually because I'm home, I'm alone, it's private, and I can just shut my eyes and go into my head, where when I'm walking around, there are people watching you, and you also don't want to trip and fall. There's so many other people around that it's really hard for me to go deep into the actual labyrinths. I think they're lovely, and some of them have been really beautiful. I don't get as much out of them, the physical ones, because they're just so many people around doing their own thing. So I like this one better, to be honest. I actually got a lot from this one, and I was not really knowing whether I would or not.
You know, I think that it would be interesting if, hold on, it says, oh, my internet's unstable. Let me try this again. I think it would be interesting if one of the times that I'm up there, we could find a labyrinth and you and I can go walk it together. If you have somebody or something you need to let go of, and I can show you how it's supposed to be done in person, just one-on-one with somebody.
Oh, yeah.
It'd be really interesting now to see that with you. So I don't know, maybe that's a future me up there in Franklin thing that we can do. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a women's retreat that has a physical one, and then during like Yule they did just one, like rented out a building and did one with like pine boughs and candles, and it was beautiful. It was very aesthetically pleasing, but I was like, this is just too distracting. It was just too distracting to actually really go anywhere like deep. So
Completely understand. Yeah. All right, Maggie.
So I can kind of see the pluses and minuses to both, honestly. I know for me, sometimes having those outside stimuli, like engaging your other senses, like sight, smell, touch, and hearing, can help draw you into an environment more than just sitting on your bed, closing your eyes, and trying to do it more virtually. But at the same token, I also get where Rebecca's coming from because, I think you all know here I have ADHD and squirrel, shiny. So sometimes it is better just to be in a more quiet place where you don't like hear the squirrel scamper by and you're like, oh, where's he going? So I do see pluses and minuses to both. I do like doing both, I guess, because there are days where I just can't focus if I'm doing something virtual. But it's better for me to be outside. But then there's days where I'm like, yep, nope, getting too distracted here. Gotta go do this in a more quiet area. So I definitely see the pluses and minuses for both. And I guess for me, it would really depend on the day or which one would be like better for me at that time. That's it.
So Sasha said, I like that with the virtual one, you can use your imagination to go anywhere and do anything. Meanwhile, the in-person labyrinth has the advantage of having the vibes of the people involved and the location itself. All right, Churchill?
I was going to say, I guess the benefits of both too. Using your imagination to build a labyrinth means you can build a pretty sweet labyrinth, which I personally enjoy. When I wrote about the physical one, it's with your imagination, you can also kind of decide how long it is. So it's not quite the same kind of journey in. Whereas a physical one, when you physically walk through it, you can kind of feel yourself going deeper and deeper and deeper and going closer and closer to the center. I didn't feel the same way with an imaginary one. It felt kind of more like I was in direct control of how long it was, as opposed to having a path before me that I didn't set. So the physical one felt more like a journey rather than the virtual one. Whereas the virtual one, the center was where it got more interesting. But I didn't want to share that too much.
Completely understand. Darcy?
Of course, the differences would be just depending where you are. Having used that Labyrinth Locator website to check a bunch of the ones in the area back when I was trying to go to a physical one. They're all quite public. A lot of the photos of them have a bunch of like families walking along them, or one of them, from what I can tell from the reviews, is that it's like a regular stop for a retirement home. Like they just have all the residents walk it just to give them some exercise, I guess. I can imagine it's quite hard to do a meditation when you just have a bunch of people doddering by and kids laughing and doing whatever, and there's a lot of distractions. And of course, you're in a meditative state. You're trying to enter that state of no mind. It shouldn't be a factor, but at the same time, it is. Also, weather's a factor. Here, it's always raining in some level or not another. But in the mind, of course, you're able to it's always perfect weather. What's my temperature set at right now? 19 degrees. It's lovely. It's perfect. You get to wear the comfy clothes. You can be in a comfortable location where there's not going to be anybody walking by and tapping you on the head and be like, "Are you okay? Why are you just sitting there?" You're able to just do your thing and actually take the time that you need to get through the meditation. Of course, the labyrinth in Jedi Company would be different because they understand what you're doing, but doing one at a regular labyrinth just an hour away from me, for example, there's going to be other people wondering what on earth's going on. Why is this weirdo walking around in circles and mumbling to themselves and potentially crying? Who knows? That's the differences I would see.
So I do have the, I guess privilege would be the word, of being able to find a few of these that are not very distracting, though the squirrel one, I'm lucky enough that the one that I used to go to all the time, even though it's in the middle, like it's in a wooded area. You have to walk through a tree line to get to it. And they don't, like, nobody's ever there. But there are plenty of animals, and I have to just get myself into a headspace to walk that. That's out in Anderson County on some little church property. The things that I see are differences. So when I say in here, like observe how you're walking through, I find that it's actually easier to observe how you're walking through in a physical labyrinth than it is in a virtual one. But what I do also like, I think it was Churchill said that they can control the length of it. So in the virtual version, you absolutely can lengthen that as you're going if you need it to be lengthened. It's kind of like you thought that you knew how long that thing was going to be until you didn't know how long it was going to be. So there are definitely advantages like that. But I think the biggest part for me is that, so if you had been at the gathering this year, I know a good number of you were, but since you weren't, what we do for the physical one is somebody stands in to be that person. Well, assuming you have more than one mystic available. But if you have two, we had 3 at this gathering, somebody can stand in to be that other person while the mystic is the labyrinth keeper. There's something different about being in your imagination and being able to fully see that person than to superimpose that person on a physical person's face. Some people don't have the ability to talk to someone that's not there. So I've done this. For example, I've done this. I did it at work one time. We didn't have a labyrinth. I had to design my own spiral inward. I just put here's a point where it's in the middle, and I'm sure it looked really weird on camera, if anybody ever reviewed those cameras. But there I was on security guard, walking a spiral into a center. And I was able to say and release a friend of mine that had died when I was 24. And this was just a couple of years ago. So I was in my 30s when I released her, but she died when she was 24. When we were 24, we're only a few days difference. But I had to look up into the sky because I'm there physically to talk to her. It's so much different when you can have that visual, that imagination of what their face looks like. And you could read it off of them. And that itself has its own healing advantages. You never know if the mystic is going to be able to properly channel in the individual that you're looking at. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. It might be hit or miss, or it's just what you need, but you're not always going to know. So I think that those are definitely differences. Now, we didn't do the full labyrinth at the gathering, for the record. We just did the forgiveness portion of the ceremony. But those were some of the things that I noticed when I did the difference between the virtual and the physical. Anyone else? All right. Well, I think that concludes our class. Thank you, everyone, for attending my class.
Yay.
And yes, and I don't think there's homework today. No, there's no homework today, so we don't got to worry about the homework side of things. And I hope to see you next. Oh, actually, no, hold on. It is not next week, because next week is Halloween. And I'm not making y'all come here on Halloween. That's why we're doing this meditation today instead of on Halloween. Especially since my son's birthday is on November 1st, and we make Halloween like a whole thing. You'll be 13, which is an important time. 13, right? Around the Halloween time frame. So we're not doing it next week, but we will come back the week after, same day of the week, same time. And on that note, awaken the Jedi within.